How is everybody today?
Great.
Oh man, look at this weather. How could you stay this way for the next 6 months? That would be good. All right. Who has our, Kathy has our chalice lighting today. If you want to use the microphone, just click the on switch.
This is a reading from Mark Nepo's book, The Book of Awakening. And the quote is, "Our strength will continue if we allow ourselves the courage to feel scared, weak, and vulnerable by melody beating." And then he goes on, "We are all frail. We all make mistakes. We all fall prey to 1,000 emotions and exaggerations. But these things make us rich, not weak, if we are willing to face them squarely. In truth, it is not the tissue of our humanity that defeats us, but rather our refusal to accept who we are and to live accordingly, limitations included. Underneath it all, in this blindness, in many recurring forms, is the cause of most cruelty. For it is during those moments when we think we see so clearly that we break things that are irreplaceable, not even realizing they were precious. After breaking many things in my life, hearts, heirlooms, robin's eggs, I am humbled to admit that the only difference I see on earth between being strong or weak is the honesty which we face ourselves, accept ourselves, and share ourselves, blemishes and all."
Wow, it's beautiful. So let's say together, we light this chalice for the light of truth. We light this chalice for the warmth of love. We light this chalice for the energy of action. We light this chalice for the harmony of peace. Becky's going to lead us in a rousing rendition of This Little Light of Mine. Our theme today is courageous aging, letting our light shine, even if we need to get new batteries.
This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Everywhere I go, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This little light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. Let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
All right, thank you. Thank you for that. Okay. Our joys and sorrows. I invite you now to share joys and sorrows or anything in between. Remembering especially the people of Ukraine today and all other refugees around the country, the Afghanistan refugees, refugees from West Africa and all over the world. Remembering especially their struggle and their plight and sending good energy and support to them and all the myriad ways we can do that. So, Nick, would you light a candle for us? Would you mind? Thank you. Perfect. Thank you.
I wonder if we could. I
Yeah.
wonder if we couldn't have a special fundraiser for people, for our refugees,
Yeah.
Afghanistan as well as Ukraine. But I'm sure there's a need for that, and maybe we could plan a special fundraiser.
What a great idea. Thank you. Yeah. This past week I was in touch with a lawyer in New York who's in charge of, I guess he's the president of the Polish American Congress. And it's a cultural exchange. He's Polish himself and immigrated to the U.S. And they've set up a fund for support for Ukrainian refugees in Poland. So there's some great organizations. We'll put together some links and resources and send out the next email. That's a really good point. Thank you for that. I mean, every night on the news, it just breaks my heart, you know. And we can't look away. I mean, as much as we want to, we can't. We have to be with them and suffer in a way, in a tiny little way with them. Have compassion. Literally means to suffer with, cum passio, to suffer with, in the Latin. So, our hearts go out to Ukraine. Any other joys and sorrows? Yeah, Barb?
And in the midst of all of that, spring is here.
Yeah.
Blossoms were just absolutely gorgeous on the way.
Yes, vernal equinox. Yeah, thank you. Something to take great delight in, for sure. Yeah. Becky, what were you going to say?
Yeah, well, on that note, I'm just amazed and joyful that our brains and our hearts can be with the people of Ukraine, the people that have to flee places, the people that are in such hard spots, and our brain can also be joyful, appreciate beauty of where we are, and we can do two things at once. And thank goodness for that, because otherwise we'd all be drowning in sorrow and sad times. So even though it's hard to look away and be happy in our own lives, it's also amazing that we can do that, and I'm thankful for that. Because children need us to smile and be there for them, and other loved ones who need that too. So thankful for that.
Thank you for that. Dostoevsky said we have an equal debt to both suffering and beauty, to hold them both. Yeah. Yes, Marie.
On that note, I have to say it's very easy to get crushed by the worst in the world, but I am so thankful that we are trying to be tender and take care of the children we have here. We had Super Saturday yesterday, and to me it is so very important to try to do the good we can and make the children learn that hope is still possible and make them strong and being caring and having something for them to enjoy and people willing to perform for them was to me a very big plus.
That's beautiful. Super Saturday was yesterday for the children. What a great thing. The children are reminders of our future. So my talk today is about the spirituality of courageous aging, and I want to share with you something that Maya Angelou wrote. It's entitled On Aging. When you see me sitting quietly like a sack upon a shelf, don't think I need your chattering. I'm listening to myself. Ho, stop. Don't pity me. Ho, stop your sympathy. Understanding if you got it. Otherwise, I'll do without it. When my bones are stiff and aching and my feet won't climb the stair, I will only ask one favor. Don't bring me a rocking chair. When you see me walking, stumbling, don't study and get it wrong, 'cause tired don't mean lazy, and every goodbye ain't gone. I'm the same person I was back then, a little less hair, a little less chin, a lot less lungs, and much less wind, but ain't it lucky I can still breathe it in. She has a way of putting things in words, of course. So, my sermon this morning is about the spirituality of aging courageously in our otherwise youth-obsessed culture. And so this is no easy task. So doing my research, I read about a group of women in a nursing home in Miami who were sitting around talking about their ailments. "My arms are so weak I can hardly lift this cup of coffee," said one. "Yes, I know. My cataracts are so bad I can't even see my coffee," replied another. "I can't turn my head because of the arthritis in my neck," said a third, to which several nodded weakly in agreement. "My blood pressure pills make me dizzy," another went on. "I guess that's the price we pay for getting old," winced an old man as he slowly shook his head. Then there was a moment of silence. "Well, it's not that bad," said one woman cheerfully. "Thank God we can all still drive." Thank God we can all still drive. You've heard of the Serenity Prayer, the 12-step programs? Have you heard of the Senility Prayer? God grant me the senility to forget the people I never liked anyway, the good fortune to run into the ones I do, and the eyesight to tell the difference. I was baptized into this awareness of my aging about 4 years ago. And I realized it's not for the faint of heart. It became so clear to me when we were driving down the road in Charleston with our grandchildren in the back seat. We were headed somewhere fun, I'm sure, when 5-year-old Lachlan, 5 years at the time, he's 9 now, he looked at me, he was looking at me from the back seat and he said, "Well, Papa, next time you go to the barber, tell her not to take off so much hair right there." Brutal. I said to him, "Lachlan, it's really not the barber's fault. I love to break dance and I spin on my head a lot." And he said, "Oh, okay." Yeah. Aging is not for the faint of heart, nor is breakdancing. You know what it's like to witness a world-class athlete performing, doing her thing with boldness and elegance? Remember in the recent Olympics in China, Eileen Gu, the young freestyle skier who won 3 medals? I can still see her doing the half pipe on those skis and all the flips that she was doing 20 feet in the air and hoping that she would land exactly where she needed to land so that she wouldn't get hurt. She did. It was breathtaking to watch that. Or how about watching a legendary musician perform at a level that no one could imagine possible, such as the internationally renowned cellist Yo-Yo Ma. I've never seen him in person, but I would give anything to see that. Watching his videos just takes my breath away. He was doing a video, I think it was this past week. It was filmed playing his cello outside the Ukrainian embassy in New York, I think it was. So when I began thinking at first about today's topic for the sermon, it was because I witnessed one of those elite level performers in the game of life, courageously living, courageously dying. His name is Lloyd Edwards. Lloyd was one of Maria's dearest friends, a father figure and a mentor to her for many years. And independent of her relationship with him, Lloyd was also one of my heroes as well when I was a young deacon in the Episcopal Church in 1990, living in West Columbia and serving the church in Lexington, South Carolina. Lloyd was on staff at the cathedral, Trinity Cathedral in downtown Columbia, and I got to know him that way. He was an extraordinary Renaissance man, PhD in physics and professor, an accomplished musician, a sage priest and mentor to many, and a clinically licensed therapist, a published author. And Lloyd died a month ago tomorrow. He was a champion in his dying. He had an extended illness that kept getting worse, and he would sometimes say that he felt guilty because dying wasn't all that bad. He realized it wasn't supposed to be joyful, but for him, the kindness and care of so many friends caring for him intimately brought joy to him to be celebrated. His obituary described him beautifully. People who loved Lloyd would tell you that none of the facts about his accomplishments would begin to capture the depth and breadth of who he was. Brilliant, funny, faithful, intellectually and spiritually curious. He would work physics problems for fun and then tell silly jokes that would make his grandchildren roll their eyes. I wanted to be Lloyd when I grew up. He kept going to the end. He's probably up in heaven right now, wondering when I'll get the next draft of the book I was working on with him to look at. He's that kind of guy, busy up till the end. Witnessing his courage and zeal for life, even in the face of death, was and is inspiring to me. And so I began to ask deeper questions, inspired by his example. What does it mean to live a good life? What does it mean to age gracefully and to age with courage? What does it mean to live fully even as one is at the same time dying? How do we prepare for death? How do we live with intention? These are all questions we consider when we explore the spirituality of aging. To live with purpose and intention doesn't happen by accident. What comes to mind for many of us, though, is something like, well, we're going to die, so we may as well just get into it and fade away, you know. And I remember that line from the Dylan Thomas poem, do not go quietly into that dark night, rage, rage, rage against the machine. Perish the thought. Let us not quietly or too easily give in to the dark night we face and prepare for our death, so that while we are alive, we may be fully alive. I have some good news for those of us who are aging, and I think that includes all of us. An extensive study done by the New England Journal of Medicine, no less, came out recently, and it found that the most productive period of a human being's life is the decade between 60 and 70. Isn't that incredible? The second most productive decade of a person's life is the decade between 70 and 80.
All right.
How about that? Yeah. The third most productive period of a person's life is from 50 to 60. The average age of a Nobel Prize winner is 62. The average age of presidents of prominent countries in the world is 63. The average age of the popes is 76. This tells us that something about the productive periods in our lives, if we're lucky to reach those times between 60 and 80. The New England Journal of Medicine. So I think the first question for us to ask as we're exploring the spirituality of aging and living courageously this life we've been given is to ask the question, and this is the question of the author of your own life. The question is this: what do I want? Because what you want is your connection to your being fully alive. When you connect with the deepest desires of your heart, you become most importantly and fully the self you were created to be. A year or so ago, I had the congregation watch a documentary. Well, it kind of went over like a flop, but I still love this documentary. It's only about 19 minutes, and you can find it Go to the New York Times and look it up. It's about a guy in San Diego called Slow-Mo. Well, Slow-Mo was what was he, Marie? He was a neuroscientist, clinician, and a neurosurgeon, yeah. And at one point in his life, he realized, and I won't say what he said, but he realized that he was a total jerk. The way he treated the people he worked with, the way he treated the people who worked for him, the way sometimes he even treated his patients. He was, just kind of a jerk. And he was tired of being a jerk. He was in the cafeteria one day, and this elderly man in his 80s or 90s was before him, and he was getting everything he could, everything he wanted. He not only got a slice of pizza and a hamburger or whatever it was, he got the dessert to go with it as well. And so this guy asked him, "What's your secret agent?" The guy looked at him and he said, without blinking his eye, he said, "Do what you want to." Do what you want to. Well, Slow-Mo, the way he got his name is he quit his job, he sold his practice, he made sure his children were taken care of. He had been divorced, so he was single. He bought a tiny little apartment near the beach in San Diego, and he is spending the rest of his life slow skating on inline skates. And in this documentary, people are asking, "So what do you know about Slow-Mo?" And one person says, "I think he was the front man in a famous rock band one time." Another person said, "Oh, he's just a homeless baker." And everything in between. But here he is. This is his joy, his passion. And he tries to skate as straight as he can skate, as slow as he can skate. It's like a statue. And he skates on one foot. You have to see it. It's hilarious. Another way of asking that same question, and then, we have to ask, well, so what good is that doing for the world? Of course, we want to say that what we do should have some positive impact for the world. Well, I'll tell you, I've followed this guy, and during COVID, when the beach was shut down, and everything around the boardwalk there was shut down, people in town went to the town group of people who run the town council, and they petitioned them to lift, the embargo on the front of the beach there for one person, Slow-Mo. It was important for that town to see him and to know that he's out there doing his thing. Interesting, right? He's not saving the world from starvation, but he's bringing some joy to the world and certainly to himself. Another way to ask that question is, if I had only one day left to live, what would I do? Now, over the years, I've done sermons during Holy Week on Maundy Thursday. Maundy Thursday is the night of Jesus' last night before he's executed on the cross the next day. And this was his last night. And in order to illustrate that, I would always ask the question, if you had one night left to live, what would you do? And I always use a quotation from a psychologist and priest writing. His name is John Powell. And it's a little book that came out in 1974, and it's entitled The Secret to Staying in Love. He references a young college student who was asked this question, if you had one night to live, what would you do? And in her diary, she writes, I would call all my friends and make sure the people I love knew that I really loved them. I would look at all my favorite pictures. I would play all my favorite music. All night long, I would dance. I would dance through the night. And as the morning would break the next day, I would give thanks for the life I've been given. So if you had one night left to live, what would you do? And then the follow-up question is this. I don't want to get too deep here because we can get in a quagmire. But if you had one night to live, what would you do? And the question right now is, so what's keeping you from doing it? Who in here is nursing a secret desire to inline skate on the boardwalk in San Diego? Besides me. Or maybe it's something else that you want to do. Well, waste no time in beginning, as our Buddhist friends, one of my Buddhist friends often is wont to say, it's later than you think. Making meaning for our life is the task at this part of our life. Finding what our core values are, being intentional about our awareness of them, and sharing them, and sharing an idea of the legacy that we've tried to live. And if we haven't succeeded with the legacy that we had in mind, the next question is, are you still breathing? And if you are still breathing, there is still time. So this is about good news. We have time to make mid-course corrections. We have time to assess what it is we want and then to embrace it and go for it. So what are your life's values? What is important to you? Meaning making is one of the most important spiritual gifts we can share with those we leave behind. What spiritual wisdom or meaning do you want to leave behind for your children, for your grandchildren, for your family members, for your fellowship? What is your unique spiritual and life journey? And how will you share that with us? How will you pass it on? I'll give you, for example, the legacy my mother left to me was the importance of hospitality and kindness. This 8th grade educated Baptist had everything to do with me becoming an Episcopal priest. Ironically, because she taught me the values of hospitality. When there's a feast, there's always room for one more. The circle is ever widening, ever deepening. And that's what the communion table is about. That's what our fellowship is about. The 2 circles on the Unitarian Universalist logo is the 2 circles of inclusion of everyone. Even those who would exclude us, the 2nd circle includes them too. So what are your spiritual values? When I chose the title for the talk, I didn't know it, but there's a book out entitled Courageous Aging. So I had to have a look at it. And there are many books on aging in the bookstore shelves. Some are humorous, some are serious, some emphasize financial planning, and some deal with loss. And most wish to help our aging population to deal with aging gracefully. It's by a guy named Ken Druck. Druck wants to begin with a self-audit. The premise being that you can't change, improve, or let go unless you know what issues you're dealing with and how you feel about them. How do you feel about getting older? Well, I don't like it, but it's better than the alternative. So, some sampling questions might be, what changes do I notice in my body, my skin, my face, my hair? And how do I feel about it? What are the changes in my memory and my ability to think? I noticed that I mislay my keys and glasses more often, and have forgotten a couple of appointments and have mixed people up, and I used to beat myself up about it, but now, because of reading this book, this one particular reviewer said, I've learned self-compassion. Incredibly vital for us not only to have compassion for others, but also for ourselves. There are questions about self-worth, about our ability to handle stress, about our changing relationships with family and friends. Are we becoming more or less patient? That's a good question. This kind of spiritual legacy writing is a way of resetting our expectations. We're guided to reconsider any regrets or remorses or denials and grudges we've held on to. This is my work as a forgiveness teacher. You know, forgiveness means making peace with the word no. You wanted this and life gave you this, and there's a gap. How do we make peace in that gap? And this is true for every one of us. There's a tragic nature of human existence. And the definition of tragedy is something that's broken that can't be fixed. We all have our own tragedies, but these are not the ultimate picture. The ultimate picture is the grace and the joy and the blessedness we all have living this human existence. How do we share that with those who come behind us? How do we make meaning for our lives up to this point? And how do we project that meaning to the days ahead? Not daring to go gently into that dark night. Another set of tools comes from Dr. Weil, Dr. Andrew Weil. Maria reminded me of his work. Do you guys know about Dr. Weil's work? He's a physician. He's writing a lot of great stuff about alternative medicines and all kinds of great healing techniques. He talks about principles of legacy writing, and the intention, the purpose of legacy writing is to discover, communicate, and preserve our values, our stories, our wisdom, blessings for future generations. He's saying that we should literally write letters. You don't have to write a memoir or any philosophical treatise. Just write a letter in your handwriting, if you can, to a family member, to a friend, to a co-worker, or a member of the fellowship, or to someone who's no longer alive. That's fine too. To share what it is that you've gleaned as wisdom in the world, in your life. Legacy writing is a privilege and responsibility for all of us, no matter our age, gender, or our connection to generations future or generations past. Legacy writing links you to your history, gives purpose to your daily life, and communicates your legacies to those you love, he writes. It nourishes you as a writer, addressing your own needs and seeing them in the span of universal human needs. We all have the same needs: the need to belong, to be known and to be remembered, to make a difference, to be blessed and to be blessed. In short, to celebrate life. And so Dr. Weil says we should write a letter, and he says we should take 15 minutes. You know, when I went to do my first confession as a college student in the Episcopal Church, the priest told me, he said, yeah, okay, so probably about 15 minutes is good. Anything beyond that's bragging. So anything beyond 15 minutes might not be that important. What's the most important thing you could write about your life and your legacy and your wisdom and your experience in 15 minutes? And then after you write that letter for 15 minutes, write your own reflections about the experience of writing that letter. How did it feel? Spend only 5 minutes doing that. And you have a treasure in your hands, and you can do it more than once, and you can share it with many people other than just your direct descendants. So, legacy writing and reflecting on our life's journey. It's so important. Who is it that you want to be? What is it that you want to do? Who are you becoming? Who have you been? All of these are really, really important questions. I remember that Lloyd, my buddy, kept going to the end. He was still learning. He was advising me about which sailboat to build for my grandchildren. He was still studying physics. He was eagerly awaiting the information we would get from the James Webb Space Telescope. He was such an example for me. And I know that you have had examples like that in your life as well. So, how do we want to pass on our legacy? How do we want to share it? I'm reminded of the quotation from Jonas Salk, and a friend of mine who referenced it in a talk entitled, "What is my responsibility for peace in the world today?" She said, quoting Jonas Salk, my responsibility for peace in the world today is to become a better ancestor for my children. And how do we do that? We do that by taking care of our stuff and our generation and our time, preparing those who will come after us to be okay with our own passing. This is an obligation and a privilege that each one of us has. So, what do you want to leave behind to your children, your grandchildren, your friends, your co-workers? Because what you want to leave behind is the essence of who you are now. And once you realize that in the writing of these letters or in these kinds of exercises, you embrace fully who you are in the present moment. You're not distracted by distraction from distraction, as T.S. Eliot said in his 4 quartets. You're living fully in the moment, knowing who you are, intentionally knowing who you are and what you want to share. And if there are discrepancies with who you want to be and who you are, if you're still breathing, you can do something about that. Now, I want to ask you all in just a minute. I shared one of my examples of an elite person at the game of life. I'm going to ask if you have anyone in mind. And before I do that, I just want to say quotation of Marcus Aurelius, the Stoic philosopher who was the Roman emperor. It's not death that a man should fear, but he should fear never beginning to live. May we live fully in this moment, knowing who we are and what we have to share, our gifts and our challenges. So, who has someone that you'd like to tell us about? Does anyone have an example of a person? I've stolen Maria's example already. Yes, Robin.
I had a family friend who knew me since I was 6 years old and was very close with my parents all through my life. And I took care of him in Florida when I was there and visited him until he was 103 years old. He passed away. And he had so many great philosophies in life. For instance, he would say, it can't be so bad for you that it's not worse for somebody else somewhere. You know, to take your mind off your troubles. And as he aged, he would say things like, well, I'm so old now, I don't buy green bananas.
Now that's living in the moment.
You know, he just had such a way of turning anything around in life to the good. And he was my example to do
What
that.
a beautiful legacy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that.
His
Anyone
name was
else?
Sam.
Sam? Beautiful. We're thankful for Sam's witness. Anyone else have anyone? Yeah.
I think of 2 people. One is my brother now, who's in the late stages of Parkinson's up in Maine. But he wants to be 75 years old, and that happens in May.
Okay.
So he's planning a birthday party. And then Maine allows him to take a medication to put himself to sleep.
Oh, wow.
So he is planning to do that just a few days after his birthday party. He has trouble doing a lot of things. He's got 24-hour care. He's not only in bed, but he still can understand what's going on around him. But, yeah, so we got a letter. He has 3 siblings now, 3 sisters, and we got a letter from him saying how much he has loved us as siblings and all that.
Wow.
Another example is my husband died when he was 56, I was 47, and our daughter was 16, and it was quite abrupt, but we had a few days to say goodbyes, and she visited him in the hospital, and he said, just always remember love.
Mm.
And she's 36 now, 20 years later, and she still remembers that.
Oh, so beautiful.
And I do too.
Yeah. And what's your brother's name?
Elliot.
Elliot. We'll hold Elliot in our hearts. And you and your sisters. Thank you for sharing. Anyone else have something to share? Okay. Yes.
So we don't end on a downer. I'll share with you a similar experience to your grandson Lachlan,
Yeah.
letting you know about your hair.
Yeah.
This was, my granddaughter was about 5. She was standing there watching me shave in the mirror, and she said, "You're old." And I said, "Well, yeah, that's true, but why do you say that?" And she said, "Well, you have a flappy neck." Oh my God! You could have said anything but that. And thus the beard.
Well, that's pretty awesome because I've never noticed you having a flappy neck.
It works.
It works. I'm gonna start growing a beard for you. Thank you for that, Josh. You know, we have an upbeat note to do now. I'm going to ask Andy and Kitty to come forward because they weren't able to be here when we had our last newcomers celebration. And they have joined our august fellowship here. And we celebrate you, we welcome you, and please come forward. And we're going to ask the congregation to respond, and we will at the end there. And Maria, would you get their presents, please, ma'am? Thank you. Okay, you stay right there, right in front of everybody so we can see you. All right. Congregation, will you welcome these new members in the warmth and comfort of your fellowship? Will you seek to add your strengths and talents to the new gifts that they bring to us? Will you share our triumphs and our struggles as our community grows and changes? We will. Okay.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Welcome.
Let us say together the covenant of the church, the promise that we make each week to ourselves and each other, which holds our community together with common purpose and common love in the midst of our beautiful diversity of belief. And let's say together, love is the spirit of this church, and service its law. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. And we welcome you with open arms and deep delight. We have gifts for you over here. Gifts, yeah. Let's give them a round of applause. Thank you.
It's good.
Okay. Beautiful. And now the closing words as we extinguish the flame. Let's say together, we extinguish the flame of this chalice. Let us follow the light of truth until we meet again.